Good afternoon. Welcome to Gaming Ballistic's Firing Squad. I'm here with Steve Jackson of Steve Jackson Games. It's a pleasure to talk to you today.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here, especially since I can do it from here.
Yeah, indeed. The working from home thing is never cooler when you can do an interview without pants.
Not admitting to anything here.
I think that's fair. So I'm going to tend to get right into things. First ask a quick question about how did talking about so I've got my Ogre supporter shirt on. Ta-da! And
No photos required.
yeah, absolutely. So how did you decide that to go from gee, I'd like to re-release Ogre to let's do it on Kickstarter? And how did that process work in your mind when you decided to do it?
Well, how it worked in my mind was Phil Reed talked me into it. He was very familiar with Kickstarter, and he made a very good case for doing it that way. So I did my homework and decided, yes, that could be very good. And in fact, 2 weeks after we got rolling on it, I was more optimistic about it than he was because I thought it was a good fit, and Phil is rightfully cautious.
Did you think that what were the biggest worries that you had, and what were the biggest hopes that, as it turned out, seemed to be fulfilled in the Kickstarter process in terms of fundraising? What could go right, what could go wrong, that you could anticipate before the event as opposed to what happened after?
Before the event, no. What we were worried about before the event was maybe there weren't enough game fans on Kickstarter. Remember how long ago this was? That there weren't enough game fans on Kickstarter to make it worthwhile. The funding goal that we set was only $20,000. That was not what it took to print it, because I wanted to print it anyway. That was the level that we agreed would make it worthwhile to create a slightly different version and fulfill to them. And of course, that was blown away instantly. We had no dreams that it would get as huge as it did. None. That was totally not in the original thinking.
Right, and so you raised nearly $1 million, like 980 some odd thousand, I believe.
Yes, and we certainly could have broken $1 million if we had kept pushing at it, but we realized that we had already pushed at it for too long, promised a great deal, and that it was time to tell people, okay, thank you, we're going to be good here.
Right. Thanks. Yeah, that's. But what do you think that tells us as a gaming community about the market itself?
Well, it tells what anybody who's paying attention has figured out in the last year anyway, which is that Kickstarter and games are a very good fit.
Do you think it says something more about the latent revenue potential, or is it something unique about Kickstarter that makes the money flow?
Well, I know that other crowdfunding systems have also worked very well. You say delayed funding systems. Explain how you mean delayed.
If I said delayed, I didn't mean it. What does it tell you about the market as opposed to this venture? That is it unique to Kickstarter that all the money is channeling to the games, or does that tell you something about that? Yeah, over the last 30 years or so, people still really are willing to drop quite a bit of money, if you like, on a quality tabletop product.
They're both true, and they supported each other, and they supported each other marvelously.
What do you think, so after the event and the intenseness of it and how it sort of took over, I think, all of your lives and Steve Jackson Games for a while, what did you learn about Kickstarters from Ogre that you can apply to future projects, not just Kickstarters, but to your business, daily business protocols, I guess?
Okay, second answer first. What we learned about daily business protocols was that people are not afraid of a huge product as long as you make it nice enough. And we were rightfully dinged for the delays on the product, but people liked what they got when they got it. So, yay.
Yeah.
Repeat your first part. Mr. Two questions at once.
Yeah, sorry about that. There's really what did you learn from running the Kickstarter that you can apply to future projects?
For Kickstarters, we needed to plan in advance 5 or 6 times as much as we did, and we were written up among other Kickstarters, in a Money Magazine article that was posted, and the author said we had done everything right, except, and this was a biggie, we had not planned for too much success. And that was absolutely correct. We were having late night meetings to discuss what to do the next day on the Kickstarter, and not if, but when we do another crowdfunded game, because Car Wars is going to happen, it's going to be much, much better scripted. I'm not saying there will be no improvisation, because it's no fun if you can't riff a little bit, but we will know in advance what we can do and what we're willing to do, and we'll have a good idea of what we are not willing to do. So no matter the amount of begging we get from individuals or small groups for individual weird things, some of them won't be in the plan and we won't do them.
It seems like some of the, I can't remember if it was part of your advice to game masters in times past, but be willing to say yes, but be very willing to say no, or at least not yet.
Yes, and in fact, we said not yet a few times when we should have just said no. That's okay. We survived. We're still working on delivering some of the promises, including, one of the stretch goals was we'll do Car Wars the same way, and that will take considerably longer to come to head. There are other things that haven't been delivered yet, but we're working on it, and people don't need it all at once anyway. The point was continuing support, and we're giving them that.
No, I had not been an Ogre player. I had known of the game way back when, and so the Kickstarter was my first encounter with the game, and playing it with this monstrous game on our kitchen table with my wife, actually, who kicked my butt twice. Just absolutely. She played the Ogre and I played the command post, and we got a few rules wrong, but she absolutely flattened me twice. And having never done any of that, it was both gratifying for her, and immediately the trash talk continued.
Other than that, did you have fun?
It was a great time, and I think that actually speaks to the longevity of the game and the concept. The one player doing many, and the other with the Ogre tanks, and then of course you get people who play ogres versus ogres with lots of battles, and it's very expandable. And I think it speaks to, and probably get around to this later, but it speaks to the benefit of a fundamentally simple design and resolution mechanic that's nonetheless scalable.
Yes, I will admit, Ogre gets that. There are other games out there that have gotten that I really admire. The original Space Hulk, for instance. Did you ever play that one?
I did not.
Workshop? It was easy to learn, and you were constantly blowing stuff up.
Which is very satisfying. So I have an almost 5-year-old daughter who now refers to any military vehicle as an Ogre tank.
Okay.
So it's she's like, that's an Ogre tank. And what were we watching recently? Something that really, it was some kind of superhero thing with this giant tank, and I was like, yeah, that's probably as much of an Ogre tank as you're going to see on DC Comics or Marvel or whatever it was. Okay. So timely. I'm going to switch topics a little bit, but very timely. Your report to the stakeholders came out within the last 24 hours, I believe.
Yes.
And so I read it with interest, and the biggest thing that, there's a lot of great tidbits in there, but one of them obviously is that Munchkin is and continues to be about 75% of Steve Jackson Games' revenue. So I want to sort of go back a little bit. Munchkin won the 2001 Origins Award for the best traditional card game, and depending on whether you want to call it the star or the cash cow, to use the old Boston Consulting Group model,
which I don't remember well enough to critique. I'll go along if you want to give me the definitions of those. I'll tell you where it falls for us.
It was the axes are something like growth and profit.
Okay.
And so the high growth, high profit, where you're just printing money, is the star. Low growth, low profit is the dog, and what do you do with those? Shoot them. And then there was the problem children, which was high profit but low growth, And then there was another one that was high growth but low profit. Oh, that's a cash cow.
That,
High growth but low profit.
The cash cow would then have to be high profit and low growth.
Correct.
No? Okay. That
Something like that.
Yeah, in those metrics, Ogre is the star because it's profitable, but it's also still growing.
Right. No, and that's there was actually an interesting back and forth about on your forums, on the Steve Jackson Games forums, where it's like, well, I don't understand how this one trick joke hasn't played out by now. And I was like, well, since I've played the different flavors as well, I was like, I don't think that Munchkin's a one trick joke, but it is interesting that how did you come up with the concept for Munchkin, and how did it morph and materialize and mature in both your mind and its business?
Well, it was really a very typical game design story, except that it succeeded so well. I had a stupid idea and I ran with it. I wanted to make a card game that would poke gentle and sometimes not gentle fun at the dungeon crawling trope. And I made up some cards. A lot of them were actually drawn up on the airplane on the way to a convention in Arizona, and had some very, very basic rules and play tested it there. And basically the play testers just wouldn't put it down until somebody dragged them out of the chair. And said, okay, got something. So came back and finished it up, and there's a whole lot that goes into finishing it up. There was a lot of balance testing and so on. But the later testers liked it just as much, and I was still having fun with it. It was an excuse to tell lots and lots of stupid jokes. And that's what Munchkin remains, is an excuse to tell lots of stupid jokes. So if you have to narrow it down to one trick, it's tell stupid jokes. But there is more than that. It lets the players interact, and people talk about competitive cooperative, and Munchkin is not what they mean by that. Because Munchkin is at its soul totally competitive. But if you do not cooperate during the game, you will lose.
Right. You
will lose. So every turn, you might very well be in a total slap 'em down showdown with the person who helped you the turn before, and vice versa. And alliances don't stick. There's just always a reason to say, well, no, I'm sorry. You hear the word I'm sorry a lot when you play Munchkin. I'm sorry, but wander in the plutonium dragon. Oh, yeah, and that potted plant is enraged.
Right, yeah, the enraged potted plant.
Right, so I jumped way beside your original question, but we sent it to print. We sent it to print with a press run of 5,000 copies, which was our standard, yeah, sure, give it a try number. And I had no hopes for it other than that it would make people laugh. A couple of members of the staff told me I was underprinting. I said, no, we can always print more if we need them. We needed to very quickly. And then again, very quickly. And that was about the time we started thinking, maybe we should not just do supplements, but do one for another genre, because there's a lot of sci-fi stuff that needs to be mocked too.
Right.
One thing led to another.
So I remember being on the Pyramu back when I don't remember how the topic came up, but you had said that you never really found something. You love pirates and you love Munchkin, and you never found anything satisfying. And there was a very dynamic discussion where I believe you walked away saying, "Okay, I've heard enough to make a game."
Right. And yes, I remember that discussion. That might have been on Talk Like a Pirate Day. That may have been I'm not sure. But the Pyramu, every Talk Like a Pirate Day gets reset, so everybody's speech gets translated to pirate. So that's always fun. At any rate, I got useful input that kind of turned sideways some of the things that I'd been thinking. To recap, for those who were not at the mood, the 3 million or so who were not there that day, I had really wanted to do Pirate Munchkin. I had a lot of the card ideas already worked out, but I didn't see any reasonable way to do classes because, I mean, yes, there are lots of different words that mean pirate, but they're all the same guy. And the suggestion came up during the discussion, well, they don't all have to be pirates, they just all have to be scurvy mariners. Okay, that
there
works.
we go. Right. And different ships and the different factions and stuff. It was fun. But I was wondering, are there any other genres that you've got kicking in the back of your mind that you would love to see as a Munchkin game that are currently either stuck or immature or not quite ready?
Well, okay, I wouldn't say stuck or immature. I would absolutely say not ready yet, because more are being worked on. No, the other ones that I want to do, including the ones that I totally can't talk about, I know how I want to attack them.
Good. Which sort of brings me into something that I think we'll weave in and out of, which is the relationship of Steve Jackson Games and its product set, both from role-playing to gaming, to some of the 800-pound gorillas in the role-playing industry. How did Munchkin Pathfinder happen? Because I was sort of on record saying that, right on my blog, I was like, this is so unlikely to ever have these companies get together, and then I was really happy to be wrong, because it potentially opens up at least speculation about other things. But how did that work out?
Well, the executive summary would be, we asked Lisa and she said, "Ha, go for it." It wasn't quite that quick, but it wasn't slow. At the level below the very, very hugest companies, the ones that are really mass market companies now, the editors and the lead designers are collegial, attending the same conventions, dealing with the same freelancers. So yeah, I won't say we all know each other, but the longer you've been around, the more likely it is that you know most people and can make a friendly call. Because yeah, it's buzzword alert, it's a win-win.
Right.
It really is.
And I think that's especially true of a game like Munchkin, where you have Galarian, you have Pathfinder, whatever. You're not gonna. You have Munchkin and you have the world of that Paizo has done, and that's just that, as you say, that's win-win, right? It's people who are familiar with Pathfinder can have a great time playing Munchkin. People who can play Munchkin get to explore some of the depth. And I've played GURPS games. I played a great GURPS dungeon fantasy game in Galarian, and they cohabitate quite well together. And so that was you can easily see that. And you've answered my question about competitors adjacent or co-opetition, which I suppose it is, relatively speaking, a fairly niche market. You know each other, and there's room for everybody to win.
No business degree here, and I'm not always up on my reading. Define co-opetition. I mean, it's obviously a portmanteau word, but what does it connote other than obviously you talk to each other, but you're competitors?
And I think that's largely what it is. There was a book. Yeah. I worked for McKinsey and Company for 2 years back from like 1998 to 2000, and then I got back into science. And so I still keep up with some of the reading. But so you have two companies that are competing. Let's pick a Ford and a GM, or even better, like Subaru has been rumored to be licensed the hybrid drive from Toyota. They're competing, but the more hybrid drives get out there, the more that can get out there. It feeds on each other. The same thing is true with...
like recently, Elon Musk announced that the Tesla patent portfolio would be licensed without charge to other automakers if they wanted to make good cars.
Right, exactly. Because the biggest thing that matters on some of these things is infrastructure.
Yeah.
And so the co-opetition is like, we've got this gaming infrastructure or whatever, and the thing about it, and I guess another place where that would be is in martial arts. All the different styles behave very much like they're competing with each other. And in a way they are, because if you're signing up for classes in one style, you're not going to go to another. But the fact of the matter is that with all the people in all the styles, at least in the United States, it's going to be just stomped by people who play football or soccer or some of these other things. And so the stylist would do better to say, yay, martial arts, and by the way, one has a niche that everyone could explore, and minus this, but it's good if you do this too, then, oh, this other thing sucks, and this guy sucks, and this, and it gets very aggressive, and what it becomes is no one wants to go into there where everybody wants to go play football. And it's sort of, and as I say, it's a hobby gaming, it's a potential niche market, so I was just trying to suss out your take on the dynamics of how that works when you...
Well, from our side at least, anybody who makes table gaming more popular is helping us. Whether we go out to drink after the show at a convention or not, they're helping us.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Come on in. Excuse me.
This is a scary part.
This is a scary part? Well, sweetie, I'm kind of busy now.
It's when Batman sees... It's when Joker sees Batman's skeleton.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm sure it'll be okay. You've seen this movie 5 or 6 times.
Oh yeah, that Joker. He's not to be messed with.
Shannon, this is Steve Jackson. This is the gentleman that I write for.
The Ogre is my fault. Blame me.
Yeah, he came up with Ogre. Okay, sweetie. I'm going to need you to either play your Legos or step out for a sec. Okay. Okay. Love you. And then we edit.
Oh, I'd leave that in. I was just thinking, it's too bad you can't keep the visuals of that.
She is a hoot. She's sat in my lap as I've gamed before, and we do storytelling together, and she just and so she is this close, and this actually gets into the next question is how badly do I need to get Shannon into Adventure Time, and
well. How much does she like the cartoon?
She's never seen the cartoon. We've read the books.
Okay.
And so I think she's into that.
Well, I'd try it.
Yeah. And do you think that there's an avenue and a market for this sort of dime bag of awesome that we can throw at kids? Is Munchkin Adventure Time or Munchkin Princesses geared towards a younger set? Or is it just taking advantage of the fad that is... Disney, well, I don't know if fad Disney Princess has been 30 years of beating us over the head with it.
Yeah, give me a fad like that every time.
Yeah.
But no, those cards are both aimed at the adult viewership. We still think of Munchkin as a game for teens and up. We know perfectly well that some families are playing with it, and that's great, and one of these days there will be a Munchkin game aimed at the younger set, but that's going to be our answer rather than to, I don't want to say it, but everybody will understand, rather than to dumb down Munchkin.
And as the father of a precocious but 5-year-old or near 5-year-old, dumbing it down is exactly right. Conceptually, kids get certain things and they don't get certain things.
Right.
Actually, if I could lobby, one of the things that would be kind of awesome would be if there was a way to do something for that set where you truly would have a cooperative Munchkin, where the kids could play together to defeat the plutonium dragon or something like that, because sometimes these kids get mean.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's Munchkin.
Yeah, it may not be, but a kid's game that borrowed from some of the themes that encourage cooperative play and resource management and sharing. Well, at least one person would buy it. But for the geek set that want to play games that are understandable and in genre with their kids, I think that would be fun. But obviously, everyone could probably come to you with their great idea. So what you're basically looking for is a board game implementation of Gauntlet. Oh, sure, yeah. Yeah.
Red Elf needs food.
So in overall, since 2001 to now, what do you think how has Munchkin, other than basically dominating your top line, but how has Munchkin changed your company?
Completely.
Yeah, I mean, but and what examples that obviously it's been a journey, but how would in 2001 to now, right? Do you still? I mean, I think people would still say, "Oh, Steve Jackson Games." You started with Ogre and the tabletop games, and it sounds like you're almost breaking into as a mass market company that happens to dabble in things like role playing games and other things. What is your viewpoint on your core competency, I guess, at this point?
Well, our core competency is still at coming up with game ideas and getting them to market in a reasonably inexpensive packaging. Ogre was an experiment at saying, okay, let's do it fancy. Now, my own personal core competency is less in business and more in telling stupid jokes, which is why Munchkin is such a wonderful fit for me. But we have grown. You saw the stakeholder report. That is 7 years in a row of growth. If we were a publicly traded company, people would be falling all over us.
No, it's true. No, I mean, because 7 years ago encompasses a time period where one of my first roles as manager was to, was involved in a force reduction during the 2008-2009 reduction, and the 7 or 8 years of growth spans that time period. So to be profitable in a terrible time for the global economy is quite a feat as both a designer as a business person.
Well, games do all right in a bad economy as long as they're not terribly expensive games, because the hours of fun per dollar with a board game is so much greater than from a movie or from a modern computer game. Now, not necessarily from a little free app, and you would worry that little free apps would really cut into what we're doing, because if it's a good little free app, the hours of fun per dollar are infinite. But you're not sitting around the table with your friends. And sitting around the table with your friends is a great goodness.
I agree. Actually, that's I don't know if you know Brett Slocum, but his blog.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
wrote more than one GURPS thing.
Yes, he did. And I believe his blog is entitled "The Art of Joyful Sitting Amongst Friends."
Mm-hmm.
So it reminded me of that.
Which is, in its style, I mean, he's obviously influenced by Dr. Barker in that, but Brett is a big Empire of the Battle Throne fan.
Yes. Very much so.
So that sounds very much like a book you might find in a Take-A-Mill library, doesn't it?
It does, and it would be very self-consistent with what he likes. So perfect segue into role-playing. So the work that I do for you is through Pyramid and that one grappling book. And so I wanted to talk a little bit, if you would, about role-playing and both in its history and hopefully its future. Steve Jackson Games is one of the only companies with a line that's maintained itself over the last 35 years as a constant going concern. There's a couple, but
we are the second oldest game company that's still doing business under the same ownership and with the same name.
Right.
Rick Loomis's Flying Buffalo is the oldest.
Okay. So how did that work? I mean, what's responsible for that longevity, and what went right for you that went wrong for others? I just read a fascinating story about how Gary was in and out of TSR. I don't know how much of that was
it wasn't
true.
All his own idea.
Right. Yeah. There's no. I know. No. But I don't know how much of that history was. A lot of it seemed pretty well factually supported, and there were documents and stuff. But so how did that work for your company? I mean, you've got GURPS and other role playing pieces that have maintained themselves for almost, but not quite, as long as I've been alive. So what did you do right, and what did others do wrong that you're willing to speculate about?
Okay, implicit in that question is the idea that keeping the same line going for decades and decades is necessarily right. It's not necessarily right. You could make a good argument now, and you could have made a better argument 5 years ago, that GURPS ought to be turned off because the market for table role-playing had really shrunk. It had been cannibalized by faster, easier-to-learn table games. But I'm loath to quit doing something that people like. And because we are not at all a publicly traded company, I can get away with saying, fine, this particular marginally profitable thing may not have played out yet. So we're going to continue, and we're going to continue to try and develop it. I can get away with that. Somebody who lived or died on quarterly returns couldn't.
What would it take to revitalize the tabletop face-to-face role-playing? And although I would include Google Hangouts, because almost all the gaming I do these days is over Google Hangouts. Video chat with 4 or 5 people. You've got the Roll20s or the Fantasy Grounds or map tools or whatever to provide the map environment. Anyway, what do you think would need to happen to... I mean, I don't know that we're ever going to see 50 and 100,000 copy print runs if you ever did. But what would it take to make it more viable to expand a role-playing game instead of maintain it?
Well, it's not like I haven't given that thought. Certainly, really good virtual tabletops are going to help a lot. I've been thinking about virtual tabletops for, maybe 20 years, and a couple of times I have gotten set up with people who were working on projects like that, but they've always cratered, usually before they were even worth talking about in public. A really, really amazingly good VTT, even if it was only for Dungeons and Dragons, would help role-playing a lot, although it wouldn't necessarily help D&D's competitors. It would tend to inspire other competitors.
Right.
A really good, simple role-playing game that was based on a popular license would bring a lot of people back to it. In theory. But people have been saying that for years, and there have been games that have come out within popular licenses, and they have had good sales within gaming, but they've never broken out.
And I guess yeah, go ahead, sorry.
No, I don't know what it would take to make people that have never role-played before pick it up. But honestly, you'd get your better renaissance from making it possible for all the people who used to role-play and don't anymore to pick it up again. Right.
And especially since most of those people, instead of being college students who are deciding between Top Ramen and the latest GURPS release, or maybe looking at BMW versus Keep the Old Car.
Well, and when we were in college, we all had more time than money. And for a lot of the boomer generation especially, that's switched.
Correct.
Although some of the boomers are retiring, and some of them now have both money and time.
Yeah, exactly. No, because I remember telling some of my friends who were about 10 years younger, they were in school and I was working, and they're like, oh, I don't have any time. I'm like, you say that now. And I said the same thing when I was in school and when I was in grad school. But, as I moved through life, I'm like, you don't really realize how much time you have to both use and to waste until you've got more and more and more responsibilities that get piled on. But speaking of Dungeons and Dragons and bomb throwing, do you think that it's a truism or a misstatement to say sort of as goes D&D? And when I say D&D, I don't just mean the D&D 4th, 5th edition or Paizo, but the generic kind of the core of it. And I guess I would sort of say the new Wizards of the Coast release plus Paizo, as goes D&D, so goes the hobby. True or false, do you think?
Short answer, true. It used to be a joke that if D&D catches a cold, everybody was going to sneeze. But then in the past few years, that particular joke has been told more about Magic than it has about D&D. because Magic is the difference for many game retailers even now between profit and not profit, all by itself. There are a lot of other things that they really like to have on the shelf, and Munchkin is one of them. But, you know, if a meteor is going to fall on Hasbro's headquarters, please let it fall. If it's got to fall on the gaming side, let it fall on D&D, because Magic is what's more important to the hobby now.
Interesting.
But mostly let it not fall there.
Right, yeah.
We don't need anything to happen to any of the tent poles.
Right. No, and that makes a ton of sense. You know, because at least I enjoy both. I've played recently a Swords and Wizardry game. I looked at the new D&D edition. I like it. It reminds me of what I bought in the box set when I was a kid. But there are things that you can't do or do less well in D&D that you can do in GURPS, as an example. It doesn't make one better and one worse, but it certainly serves different needs within the hobby piece.
Yeah,
and so,
as the French say, that's why there are lots of kinds of cheese. Different games do different things well. You have rule sets that are specialized for one genre, and you have rule sets that are specialized for one style of gaming, and then you have rule sets that somebody just wrote.
Do you think that again, I'm going to focus on GURPS because I write for it, I play it. It's really the focus of the blog in many ways. Although I do try and branch out because it is it can be an inclusive hobby when people are in the mood to be inclusive.
And breaking in on that, and that's completely good with me because the whole intent of GURPS originally, and we're still trying to do it, was to support anybody who wanted to role play. The idea was that the system could shake out of a world book and leave you just reading the info. The more complex, the more mature the system has gotten, the harder it can be sometimes to write a book where you can shake the rules out and just look at the background. But the last time we did a survey, and it's been a long time, but the last time we did a survey that asked this question, fewer than 50% of the people who bought GURPS books were actually going to take them home and use them in the campaign. There was a huge contingent that was going to take them home and work them into a campaign for another system, and there was a significant contingent that didn't role play, divided between the ones who thought they might someday and really liked reading the books, and the ones who didn't think they ever would, but really liked reading the books.
And you've probably heard the story about GURPS Biotech being used as a college textbook.
A number of them have been used as college textbooks from time to time, although what course was biotech used for? Futurism?
Genetics, I think.
Okay, interesting.
Because the information was as up to date as anything that had been released at the time.
Some of Culver's speculations could scar people for life.
That's
so good.
That's one of my things about. I think I even said that to him. Maybe the pyramid panel interview that I did, where I was like, transhuman space is a beautiful thing. I'd love to read books in it, but it terrifies me to try and game there because it's such a deep world. I find it very difficult to approach.
It would be a scary place to live.
It would.
And one thing about transhuman space is that, if you really look at that background, even the 1%ers in that background have things to worry about. A lot of them don't know it, but there's uncertainty in that background on a very deep level.
Correct. It's almost more accurate to describe it as it's almost not quite approaching a horror genre as much as it is a futurist science fiction, because almost everything in it is conflict and strife and lack of humanity or the unimportance of humanity. As we said, it's a deep background that it's like the dark ocean beneath the surface. Yeah, it seems like there's glinting sun on the water, but that's just the top surface.
Right.
But in terms of role playing as a genre, as an ecosystem, and GURPS specifically, granted, entirely hypothetical, but if you could. If we could guarantee that it would be hypothetical and would return enough profit to make it worthwhile, so we'll take the constraints that really exist, like in the report to the stakeholders, everything else is a non-priority, and role-playing in a couple other of your lines falls into that, and it's appropriate as a business person. But what would you like to see the GURPS ecosystem look like 5 or 10 years from now?
More writers, more variety of writing, more digital material available, and again, a really good VTT would be wonderful. We're talking about a couple of things that might, oh man, buzzword alert, strengthen the community, but seriously, ways that might help players and GMs and writers and would-be writers talk to each other more and see what comes out of it. Because we're not really at a full crowdsource setup yet, because as you yourself know all too well, writing for GURPS is not easy. You don't just sit down and scratch off a GURPS book and say, haha, that's done now. Because for it to have the name on it, there has to be system stuff. Yet it has to be possible to read past the system stuff. That's a high bar.
Right.
Anything we can do to help people make that bar will be very appreciated by the ones who are reading it and would like to see more. I'd like to see more variety. I'd love to see it become economically feasible once again to do licensed products. Let's center Stevie a little bit there. Web tools. But right now, the market is not favorable for the kind of license where you have to pay a big advance or even a big guarantee. You just can't sell enough. It's not like it was 15 years ago. Right.
And that kind of, and the of course you get into the niche of a niche thing, right? I mean, within you have you'd have to have so many people interested in that particular license that they'll buy it just because. That they would have bought it anyway, regardless of whether it's a GURPS or whatever.
Or your role-playing community has to be so huge that you get enough of those people anyway, especially with a science fiction or fantasy license, especially fantasy, which crosses over so strongly with most role-playing. Because most role-playing out there is still fantasy role-playing.
Absolutely.
That's just the way it is. But in the glory days, we did some licenses that even at the time might have been considered a little bit obscure by some gamers, but I was delighted to be able to do them. And now that's just, it's got to at least pay for itself and make people think good thoughts about us.
Sure. No, absolutely. Do you think that the future... Because I could also see two kind of parallel existing, because the Discworld role-playing game, which is about to come out, is a GURPS core, but it's written for Discworld. It's a little bit like the experiments you did with Powered by GURPS, I think.
Right.
Do you think that there's a future for more, we're going to do X, and we're going to take the huge breadth of GURPS rules, and we're going to say, this pyramid idea that's not appropriate for all GURPS is perfect here. So we're going to write that into that rule book as either a hardback or a digital or whatever. It doesn't matter. To me, it doesn't matter. Some people it matters. But we're going to take the rules that are perfect for that and release the Guardians of the... I probably shouldn't do that. That's a tightly bound trademark.
I understand the question.
Right.
And I have to waffle a little bit. We have no plan to do that, but we certainly haven't sat down and said we'll never do that.
Right.
Just the next time something comes up where that seems worth considering, we'll consider it.
Right. No, it just seems like it's an interesting thing because, to your point about more money than time, right now I've had a campaign that I put on hiatus because I don't have time to run it. It's not that I don't have ideas. It's not that I don't have the willingness. But the first thing that I had to do, and it's kind of funny, is, I like to write rules, and my pyramid submissions are largely that. And I had to say, dear God, if I take all the rules that I wrote that I thought were a good idea and run them in one campaign, I'd shoot myself in the head. There's just too much. And if you take the entire GURPS universe and say, okay, well, every game master has to sort through everything in order to run the campaign that they want, having some filtering done for somebody is a great thing. It just cuts down the barrier to entry to get into it. On the other hand, having all the toolkits is awesome because there's no genre, there's no play style that is really truly out to lunch. Although some of the really gonzo stuff doesn't fit well within finite point-based accounting.
Right. But that's cinematic anyway.
Correct.
And my idea of the perfect role-playing session has always been one where the players didn't need to know the rules. But that puts a huge burden on the GM. And some GMs carry that burden without thinking about it. They're just automatic great game masters. Aaron Alston was like that. It was wonderful to play with Aaron. But most of us have to open the book once in a while.
Right. So that really brings me, at least, to the end of the formal questions and stuff. I want to thank you for your time. But as always, I always like to give my guests the parting shot. So is there anything that you'd like to leave the community that will watch this video with as we sign off?
Hi. Pick on your friends who don't play games but are decent people to have around a table and bring them in. The hobby grows virally. So yeah, play games with people. That's what makes it happen. Comment on forums. Be part of the community. Help us crowdsource what games are going to be like in the next 10 years. Have fun.
Yeah, it does seem to come down to that, doesn't it?
It's a fun thing. Oh, something that you might do. I assume you can run a crawler, but if you can give people a link to the stakeholders report, since we talked about it.
When I did the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge, I was like, I want to put the website in the video.
Right. Oh yeah, Phil Folio just tagged me on that.
Yeah.
And I have barely had a really healthy day for the past month. I'm going to have to figure out a way to Munchkin that because I'm going to do it.
Right.
But Evil Stevie has got to change the rules somehow.
So there are two things that will help with it.
Evil Stevie is actually not in great shape at the moment.
Yeah. Patrick Stewart did a great one where he just filmed himself writing a check and then grabbed an ice bucket, put 2 cubes in a tumbler, and drank some good scotch. So that was his version of the ice bucket challenge.
Very nice. I understand Hawking did a great one, but I haven't been able to get the video to play.
Oh, I haven't seen that.
Watching it.
The 501st Stormtrooper Legion did one where someone came with an ice bucket for Darth Vader, and he used the Force on him and had him dump it on somebody else. So that was a pretty good send up for that one too.
Excellent.
Yeah. One last thing that probably won't make it, but in terms of crowdsourcing, have you heard of the Pyramid Right Club? You may not have. Christopher Rice started an informal group, and I'm part of it, where we encourage amateurs to come through with their ideas, and we help them with the style guide and the formatting and do it this way and not that way.
Oh, awesome.
I think I counted it up. We have almost 100,000 words submitted to Stephen through that group.
Awesome.
So, and we just saw 1 or 2 of the original articles that came through sort of be tapped. So it's sort of an embarrassment of riches, but that is something that we took into our...
That's wonderful. That is totally paying it forward. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. It's been a lot of fun, and obviously I use it because I get to get peer review, and my stuff gets stronger. But it's really good because, as you said, the style guide is intimidating. The formatting guide is intimidating. The amount of information you have to have is intimidating.
Yes.
And there is a GURPS way of doing things.
Mm-hmm.
And to say, well, I don't like that, so I'm going to do this, even though however many books may do things differently, people need to be guided through that so that they're producing good content.
Yes.
So, all right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Steve. Bye-bye.
Bye.